Well, here we are again. It is now 9:25 on the 27th of October, 2023. And there is a yellow warning out about rain. It came out about 15 minutes ago. So do be careful as the day goes through. The forecast is for rain and thunderstorms all the way up till this afternoon. So watch out for a heavy morning downpour. It's relatively moderate at the moment, but if they've got a yellow alert out, it could easily be that there is going to be an absolute team of rain. Oh dear, it's amazing what happens when you're tired. A team of rain coming down through the roof. As the morning wears on, so do be careful. We have been poking around for some time now in the cellar, and we have got bits and pieces from the past to show you as we come to the end of this particular month, getting ready for the bonfire season. And that comes in with a bang next week. So let's just have a look at what we've come up with. Even I don't know. There's been a few new additions to the town over the summer. A whole raft of new eating and sleeping places cropped up in Lewes over the summer. Most of them were in Cliff, but Coat is at the top of the town on the high street. So far, I've only been in for a cup of coffee, but they've been very welcoming, and I suppose that it looks as if it'll do very well. Give it a try. Then there is Aqua at the bottom of the town, attached to the Premier Inn, also new. I've been in there as well, and they were equally as welcoming, and didn't mind that I just popped in for a cup of coffee and not a full meal. But Fuego is something else. I've only looked in through the front door. It's a new concept, of course, of cafe bar. Not new in the continent, I suppose, but not terribly frequent over here. And I haven't been in there because I'm a bit afraid I might go for the bar rather than the coffee. But one day I'll give it a chance. Anyway, some places new in Lewes over the summer and places for you to try. I'm here in the village of Charleston, a charming, picturesque British village with a population of 500.
That's not Charleston, Keith. This is Charleston, South Carolina. A charming, picturesque village with a population of 120,000 in the United States.
What about this town, Boston? 120 miles north of London in England. Population, 35,000.
That's not Boston. This is the real Boston. Boston, Massachusetts, population 4 million.
What about this lovely little city, York? I suppose you Yankees have one of those too.
Yes, we do. Welcome to the new and improved York.
Now here's one you can't beat, London. That's London in England. Population, 8 million.
Okay, I'll give you that one.
Join us for a journey to different cities with the same name.
A new show comparing big American cities with the small British and European towns that share the same name.
We never should have let you win that little war, Melissa.
Actually, Keith, we beat you at 2 little wars.
What's in a name?
Coming soon to public television.
This was what the prison looked like when the British Admiralty bought it to house the prisoners of war.
So they bought the prison and they made many adaptations to it. One of them, interestingly, they took the doors off the cells.
Good for freedom of movement, but not so good for privacy. The doors survive in the local museum, all that remains of the prison's interior. The prisoners were separated. The enlisted men, mostly Finns, Swedes and a few Ireland Islanders, were put into the prison, 3 to a cell. But it was a different situation for the Russian officers.
The officers, very different case. They were billeted out amongst the gentry families of the town and surrounding areas, not just Lewis. They had freedom of movement, they had freedom of association, and they generally joined in, if you like, middle to gentry class society. So we have an account, for example, of the officers being very popular dancing partners at local balls because they could waltz so much better than Englishmen. There we go.
Not all the Russians lost themselves in the pleasures of the waltz. Many, like Gyur.
He sat on the bank while the river still chattered onto him, a babbling procession of the best stories in the world. That was the excitement that Mole experienced in the story Wind in the Willows. And indeed, rivers large and small everywhere all have many stories to tell. The River Ouse that flows through Lewes is no different. In fact, for much of the town's history, it has played an important part. Today, the river carries nothing but pleasure craft. But for a long time, it was a busy, bustling port. About a mile upstream from here is the village of Hamsey. It sits on a triangle of land which splits the river as it curves down towards the town. Hamsey is barely a village today. A few houses with the 13th century church standing in splendid isolation. But Hamsey was a Saxon port in the pre-Norman era. Historians estimate that over 1,000 people lived here, populating a port that saw ships sail up the Ouse to trade goods. There is no doubt that the Normans had a bit to do with its demise. The area was handed over to a Norman lord. But the community was attacked by an enemy it couldn't stop. An army of rats, which disembarked from one of the visiting ships, went ashore and infected the village with bubonic plague, the Black Death. Gardens, very soothing, and Lewes has lots of them. me Mirador Television YouTube.
Actually, in our flight guide, we show 650 metres, but there's a 235 metre overrun, so we're up to nearly 850 or so metres. We only permit single-engine aircraft. We don't allow helicopters to come in. We don't allow twins to come in, and that's largely from a noise point of view. We're very conscious that we don't want to annoy our neighbours. In the local villages, the 3 villages that are sort of up at the western end of the airfield, as it were. There's nothing down at the eastern end, but Swanborough village, Yprk village, and Rodmell, and Kingston to a certain extent. We want to keep that.
What are the restrictions? Presumably you don't have night flying or any of that?
We don't have night flying. We don't have teaching. We don't have any flying for monetary gain on the war. The time we did it was 2 years ago. We've been asked several times by the villagers when are you going to have another open day? Unfortunately, we've picked a day which is not very clement in terms of the weather. But out of that, we like to think we strengthened the relationship with the villagers because we took ultimately we took children flying and doctors flying and village people, so quite a few of them have had flights with us from time to time. And we think that's important because we like to think that the airstrip and the Aero Club is an integral part of the community.
Yeah.
You can play that game, but it won't be funny for long. Oh, for long. For long. But when she's high, she's a skywalker. Doesn't matter. Just focus your mind on the wire ahead. It doesn't matter. It's a long way down. Long way down. So you place your foot to assess the tension and convince yourself to continue knowing it's wrong. Oh, it's wrong. It's wrong. But when she's high, she's a skywalker. Doesn't matter. Just focus your mind on the wire ahead. It doesn't matter. It's a long way down. Long way down. What a spectacular performance. Will there will be no net for her. Such a spectacular performance. Who's going to blame her for this time? Oh, Skywalker, this time. Oh, Skywalker.
But when she's high, she's a skywalker.
Skywalker.
Just focus your mind on the wire ahead. It doesn't matter.
Skywalker.
Balancing high above the world tonight.
Skywalker again. Oh, again. Oh.
Well, it was just a few memories from the past, and we sometimes forget about these things, and then we find them and think, "Oh my goodness me, I remember when we did that," and then. Well, one thing we've got ghosts. Let's take a look at one of the ghosts. Huh. Huh. Telling us that we have a program somewhere about the ghosts, so we better get rid of that, haven't we? Let's just take a look at what else we've got digging up from the basement, as it were. And tell you one thing that we haven't got. He said with some authority and belief, and we haven't at all. Let's see. Now, we had a nice clear out the other day, and I think I cleared out more than we planned. There's one here that says untitled. Let's see what's on it. Well, good morning, Philip.
Good morning, Mr. Keith. I'm sorry
morning.
you've had a hell of a morning, beginning with a drenching, as I understand it.
Absolutely. I mean, talk about drench. I could barely see through the rain. Earlier in the week. But there we are. So why not have
it's cold comfort, but it was the same here. It was diluvian. But anyway, this is not about the weather or about me. This next however many minutes we go for is about you. Because I expressed the interest to B1, aka Richard Barton, that I would actually like to find out a bit more about you, your background, your professional career. Barton has hinted, and you've dropped little sort of snippets about your journalistic career. But could we start perhaps with your background? Now, you're a Louisian now. Were you born in Lewes?
No, I wasn't. I was born in Sutton Coldfield in Warwickshire. I'm a Warwickian, if that's the right word. It's a little town, or it was a little town. It's grown now, of course, just about 7 miles outside Birmingham.
Yes, I've heard of Sutton Coldfield many times. So you're a Midlander by birth.
Absolutely.
And I know we're not meant to ask anybody their age, but what year were you born in, Keith?
39.
No, oh, my goodness. So you were a war baby.
I was. In fact, it was November 39, and some people said I actually caused the war.
That I can imagine. That I can imagine with your very proactive views. Herr Hitler, if he'd have known you, would have been very scared.
Yeah, he wouldn't have stood a chance.
So you were born and brought up in the Midlands until how long, Keith?
Well, I was there until I was the age of 18. And I was lucky that in Sutton Coldfield, it was Bishop Vesey's grammar school, which is still a grammar school. It's still there as a grammar school, but it was one of the best grammar schools in the country. And although
Yes.
I didn't have parents who could send me to public school, I probably got the next best education. And I was really a very lucky boy.
Yes, well, I can, if I may say so, relate entirely to that. I was very lucky. I had a grammar school education in Stockport. Now, you mentioned your parents. May I ask you about your mum and dad?
Yes, indeed.
So-
My father was a war hero. He was at Dunkirk. And the unfortunate thing is that, as quite often happened with hero soldiers, is they found it very difficult to come to grips with the fact that after the war nobody wanted to know, and
Precisely.
it caused some friction in the family. So I can't say that I had the happiest of childhoods, but I understood why.
Well, that's a sadness. Did mum work?
No, but I mean, it was still in the old days where women were only just going out to work.
Yes.
She would have liked to have done, I think. She wasn't a natural homebody, but I had a younger brother and sister, and they actually gave her more of a maternal instinct, I think, than I did.
So, 3 children, you the eldest.
Yes. For my sins.
And as you say, as with many women of that generation, I remember talking to my own mother, who was a war baby, my mother-in-law, who was a war baby. They wanted to do so much more. But you felt that your mum, as it were, warmed into being maternal with your younger siblings.
Yes, well, I mean, partly I think it was because I, like most children who were during the war, I was looked after by my grandparents. And I came from a very interesting family. They were partly the Moore family, who were HP Source, not the rich part, I hasten to add. But I had more great aunts and great uncles and cousins coming out of my ears than you could shake a stick at. They were large families. Yeah.
Well, the next time I go to my fridge and get the HP Source out, I will now think of you and your family.
Indeed.
But in all seriousness, all those relatives, you spent a lot of time with your grandparents, as ironically I did for different reasons. I mean, in the war, the Midlands were a Nazi target, weren't they?
Indeed they were. Coventry, of course, took a blitz. But we lived on the edge of Sutton Coldfield, out in the country. And I was really quite a country boy in many ways. And I must confess, I was able to roam the lanes and the fields and the woods and so on and so forth. As I say, in many ways, I lived a privileged life as a young boy, well looked after.
That's a lovely free life. The modern generations don't have that blessing.
No, I mean, I could actually go on my own for miles without any fear of being attacked or tampered with or in any way. I mean, it was wonderful, and you actually got used to being able to sit under a hedgerow or go into a wood and not worry about it one little bit.
Quite. Well, that's a blessing. So, am I to take it that you were never evacuated?
No, I wasn't. I don't think there was any issue with children in Sutton Coldfield. I don't think anybody was evacuated from there. Basically, we could hear the. Well, I say we. I've only got vague memories, of course. Could hear the German planes going overhead, but they were, generally speaking, aiming somewhere else. There was one bomb dropped about half a mile from my grandparents' home, and the rest of the time there was not much at all. So we were very fortunate.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, you mentioned Coventry. It may be of interest to you and the viewers that my wife's family, her grandfather and grandmother on the maternal side, they lived in Coventry pre-war. But he was a very, very bright, intelligent man who had served in the First World War. And he took the view that eventually Coventry would be blasted. And he was right.
Absolutely, yeah.
And he moved the entire family. So he moved him, his wife, his son, and the 3 daughters, my wife's uncle and aunts, and they went to Ambleside in the Lake District. Sure enough, within less than a year, Coventry was blasted.
Absolutely, really blasted too. I mean,
yeah. Well, the equivalent. I think Coventry is the twin town to Dresden, isn't it?
Yes.
Because Dresden was razed to the ground.
Yeah. The two of them took a pasting very similar to one another. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Anyway, back as I say to yourself. So there you are. You live in the area till you're 18. Take us from there, because you obviously became a journalist at least.
Yes, I did. I mean, a couple of significant steps prior to me, a lot really before I became a journalist. But when I was 14, I reached the status of Queen Scout. So I was one of 2 nominees to go with the Birmingham contingent to the World Jamboree in Niagara-on-the-Lake in Canada.
Oh my goodness!
Quite an interesting adventure. And while I was there, I was sitting in the arena one night, just talking to a bunch of other scouts, and there was a chap who had got a badge on, and I said, what's that badge? And he said, well, that's British Columbia. And he waved his hand and he said, it's way over the mountains, down to the sea. And I had this incredible idea of what British Columbia was all about, and which held me in good stead, because at 18, what happened at 18 was you couldn't go to university for 2 years because they were filling in for those people who were coming out of national service. So there was a 2-year hiatus. So I went off to British Columbia and went to university there.
Well, that's extraordinary. I mean, that's not even a gap year. That is filling in in a very innovative way as a very young man in a very different generation to achieve academic success. I can only say respect to that. So that's British Columbia. Now, educate me. British Columbia, West Coast Canada?
Yes, it is the furthest western province. Vancouver is its major port, major city, but its capital is actually on Vancouver Island, which is an island just offshore, and it's called Victoria. And they say of Victoria, it's the for the newlywed and the nearly dead. It is a beautiful little backwater.
Well, now, you mentioned Vancouver. Now, those people who have been sensible enough not to watch B1 and B2, you told us that, I thought, wonderful story about how you came to marry your wife.
Oh, yes, indeed.
And that was in Vancouver.
It was in Vancouver.
You were a journalist in Vancouver. And
yes,
remind us all of the story, because it's worth repeating.
Well, I got a job at a radio station as a journalist. In fact, once again, I was very lucky because the news director was a man called Roy Jacks, who had worked with Edward R. Murrow on Fleet Street and was a journalist of some considerable renown. And Roy became my mentor. But when I was working there, the lady in the accounts office was a very attractive lady, and I would go in and chat to her. But I also, being a young journalist, was always out of funds, and I would say, could I have an advance against my salary? And she very kindly said, well, all right, and gave me a small advance. And off I would go to the pub at lunchtime. And one day she said, what do you do with these advances? And I said, well, I go to the pub. And she said, well, you're not getting any more unless you take me to the pub. So for economy's sake, I took her to the pub and found I quite liked her. So I kept on getting advances to buy her beer. And then one day she said, do you know how much you owe? And I said, no. She said, $25. Now, in those days, I'm talking about 1960s, that was a lot of money. And I said, oh, dear. And she said, I'll tell you what, I will pay it off if you marry me.
Wow. It's such a story.
2 seconds and said, okay.
Yes, well, and as you've commented before, the best decision you made in your life.
Absolutely.
And just in passing, I mean, I know she's no longer with us, but how long were you married? Till sadly she passed away?
Yeah, 40 some odd years. We were married in, we did the naughty thing, which wasn't even tolerated in those days. We lived together for a short period of time. So we weren't married until 1973. And she died in 2014. So we were married for a long time and together for even longer.
Well, together for even longer. And as you say, in those days, perceived as living in sin.
Yeah, absolutely. We were naughty.
Well, my goodness, if that were applied these days, we'd all be in hell next week.
Absolutely.
So let's go back to your 2 years in British Columbia, and you qualified for what, Keith?
Well, believe it or not, my two majors were classics and Latin and classical studies.
Oh my goodness!
But believe me, I wasn't a scholar. Bishop Veazey's had a headmaster who was a classics scholar, so we were all pushed to take classics at grammar school. So when I went to university, it just seemed sensible to take the courses that I was familiar with.
Well, quite so.
Sorry?
Quite so. I mean, so if it's the right word to use, did you graduate?
Yes, I did. I've got a BA in Latin and Classical Studies, believe it or not.
Well, I can believe it. I can believe it. Latin and the classics, I never did. At my grammar school, we were streamed, and I never achieved the top stream. So I was never taught Latin and the classics, which is a shame, but there we go. This isn't about me. So you graduate in that. You're in British Columbia. What do you do then?
Well, I stayed in British Columbia. I'd planned to go for 2 years. I stayed, unlike us, where a degree is 3 years, a degree in Canada is 4 years. So
Yes.
I finished my degree there. And of course, by that time, my life was there. So I stayed on, and I was in British Columbia for 17 years.
Just rewinding, it was a 2-year wait because of the national service glut.
That's
You
right.
go over there, but in fact, rather like in Scotland, the degree was 4 years.
That's right. Yeah.
So as you say, by the time you'd graduated, and as a still, relatively speaking, young man, your life was there. You've been there for 4 years.
Yeah, indeed. And by that time, I got to know, of course, an awful lot of people, some very interesting people. And so, I didn't feel as if I was disenfranchised by staying on.
No, quite.
I became what they call a British Columbian.
Well, if I may say so, sadly, you and I have never yet met in the flesh. That will happen. But you strike me as a very gregarious, engaging person. So did that help over there?
Well, I think, yes. I was very lucky because, I am social. At least I was up until about a year ago. I mean, I still am, except that, as you know, I'm ability is an issue nowadays because I got Parkinson's. But I met a lot of fascinating people, and not least of which is a family called Bell Irving. And the Bell Irvings were pioneers in British Columbia. They'd been governor generals, they'd been captains of clippers, and so on and so forth. So I suppose in some ways I lived a bit of a privileged life, and it was nice being part of society, as it were, as a young man.
Yes, well, give yourself credit. You were accepted by them because they liked you.
Yes, I think that was true. I was very well looked after.
And they will have been, I'm sure, intrigued by the fact you were British.
Yes, indeed.
So, in a sense, I've always said you make your own luck in that environment. So there you are, as you put it, privileged by these good contacts and a good social life. So you've graduated, you've made good friends and contacts. Did you then move into journalism?
Well, I'd always lusted after it, particularly broadcast journalism. And I always think that the trigger was way back in Sutton Coldfield in somewhere around 1953, 54. There was a horrendous train crash.
There was.
You remember that? Yeah.
I'm too young to remember it, but as a rather nerdy train enthusiast, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. And at school, we could see the planes flying overhead and so on with reporters and taking pictures and so on and so forth. And I had this a terrible desire to be in there and telling people what was going on. And I think that sort of started me thinking, well, that's the sort of career that I would want. But
You see,
in those days, I had no idea how to go about it.
Well, join the club. I mean, Richard and I have shared with you and the viewer and his dog the triggers for what we've eventually done. So there you are with this instinctive. And by the way, you've always told Richard and I to keep it clean. So can we not use the words like lust?
Very well.
Because you'll get complaints. But no, so that takes you back to that instinctive, this is what I'd like to do. So how did it come about, Keith?
Well, strangely enough, I had a strike against me in British Columbia because I sounded English, and they weren't at all fond of having people on the radio and television who sounded English. So I had to work 10 times harder than most to get a foothold in the career.
Well, that surprises me.
Well, people are biased in the strangest ways all over the world, as you know. And you have to be amongst them to find out what the biases are. But it was the same Englishness, if you like, that actually triggered me into the work, because I played rugby, and I became the PR man for the Vancouver Rugby Union, and they needed somebody to go on and do the sports program every Saturday. So I went and did the sports program, and the people at the CBC liked me. They encouraged me. They trained me, and boy, did I need training. And bit by bit, I worked my way into the media scene of Vancouver, and eventually ended up as the news director of a radio station, which was Bernie Braden's television station. You recall Bernie Braden?
I'm in awe. I'm in awe. I remember Bernard Braden. I remember.
Well,
So let's rewind. So first of all, even in those days, the British Columbians played rugby.
Oh, indeed they did. In fact, Buzz Moore, who was a British Columbian rugby player, was the first captain of a Canadian side to lead a side out of Twickenham. And there were a number of people who went there, whose names you may vaguely remember. Graham Budge, who played for Scotland. Brian Whiteman, who played for England. Ian Mackenzie, who played for Scotland.
Very much so.
Several more who found their way out to the West Coast. So the rugby playing group were very, very strong.
That interests me because it's a sport I love, I have to say. So what position were you? What position did you play?
Well, at school, I played three quarters. And I started out at university playing that. And the coach, who was an Australian, said, look, he said, there's a guy, I can remember the guy's name, Gordon Nishi, who's a Japanese, a Canadian Japanese. And he said, he is so light on his feet, you'll never displace him. Can I suggest to you try number 8, which I did. In those days, you didn't need to be 10 feet tall.
No.
So number 8 I became, and that's more or less what I played throughout my entire career.
How extraordinary. So if I may ask, in those days, what sort of height were you, Keith?
I was about 5'10", and I haven't really grown much since. I'm still about 5'10".
Well, at least you haven't shrunk.
No, not so far.
I mean, Barton used to be 6 foot, but look at him now.
Wow, just a shrimp.
Now, you mentioned CVC. Does that stand for Canadian something.
Yeah, it's the equivalent of the BBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
Sorry, it's CBC, not CV.
Yeah.
CB.
No, BBC. Yeah.
So you ended up on a radio station. You got to a radio station,
Yes.
and then ultimately you became their head honcho by the sounds of things.
Well, I was. I like to pride myself in despite the strike against me with my accent, I was a pretty good journalist. And actually, being trained as a journalist in North America was good training because they are very, very, very competitive. So you have to be good to survive, and I survived. And eventually, I became the head of news director, as they call them there, of the radio station, which had a call letter CJOR, and I said it was Bernard Braden's old station.
Yeah. So, right, could we try and place this in the chronology now? What year are we talking now, or years?
I started my broadcast career in 1963. And when I left Vancouver as head of news, it was 1973. So that's over a 10-year period is my journalistic career sort of slowly developed.
So by 1973, you're already married to your dear wife.
Yes.
Because she paid all your debts off.
Absolutely. Good reason.
Can there be? There cannot be a better reason, can there?
No, not at all.
So by 73, what do you do then? Do you stay in North America or do you come back to Britain?
I came back to Britain in 1973 because that was the year that private radio, commercial radio started here. It was given a license. And Bernie was applying for what was the London General License, later became Capital Radio. And he asked me to head up the news section. Unfortunately, we didn't win the franchise. But Bernie, being Bernie, he immediately got onto the phone and said to the people in Birmingham at BRMB, I've got this chap, you're looking for a news editor. Can I recommend him? So I went up to Birmingham and I was the first news editor of BRMB Radio in Birmingham.
So you're almost back home?
Yes. Within a spitting distance, yeah.
So that's sort of 73, 74. Were mum and dad still alive?
Yes, they were.
And your siblings?
Yes, they were both alive. I've lost my sister some almost 10 years ago now, but my brother is still alive and lives in Lincoln.
Lincoln? That's an interesting city, Lincoln.
I've only
much underestimated, actually.
Beautiful.
So there you are at the Birmingham, have I got this right, radio station?
Yes.
And how long were you there for, Keith?
2 years. I left to go to BBC Pebble Mill, and under a guy called Phil Sidey. And Phil Sidey was a very talented man who, do you remember Pebble Mill at 1?
I was about to say, I remember it only too well. And I remember a weather reporter jumping across floating things on a pond to show us the weather. But that may be a bit after your time. I don't know.
I was there from only for about 6 months in 1975, the beginning of 1975, because I bumped into to Phil in a corridor one day, and he said, "Oh, I've been looking for you. I need somebody to go to Northern Ireland for 2 months." And so I was always ready for a new experience. So I said, "Yeah, okay." And so they shoveled me off for 2 months, and I stayed there for 15 years.
Well, you mentioned Ulster Television to the Chichester crew, and doing a program with your trousers round your ankles.
Yes, indeed.
Because I did watch that.
Right.
And I have to say, I wish I was as photogenic as your Chichester people, in particular, Dr. Mort.
Yes.
But there we are.
She was rather
so
pretty.
You ended up there for 14 years.
Yes.
Right through the Troubles.
Yes, absolutely right through the Troubles. In fact,
tell us a bit about that.
Well, I mean, it was a fascinating time, and you don't realise sometimes what effect it's having on you. I have to say, and I admit it now, that because of the tension that was surrounding us, it was a hard drinking, hard playing, hard partying period of my life.
I'm sure it was.
I got hooked on cigarettes, but I didn't get hooked on booze. But you forget some of the things until you're reminded of them. But when I was first there, if you said you wanted to go out for dinner, you went down to the Europa Hotel. If the Europa was bombed, you immediately roared along to Donegal Pass on the basis that there was a Golden Steer restaurant. And if that was bombed as well, you'd had it.
My goodness, talk about living on a tightrope.
Yes, it was a bit tense from time to time.
I mean, if I may ask, were you there alone or were you there with your wife?
My wife came out about 6 months after I first went, when it was obvious that I was going to stay, because the 2 months stretched into 4 months and so on. As a journalist, I was asked to do one or two other things while I was there, and one of them was that they discovered that they'd given everybody the summer off from the BBC's radio service there, and they said, would I stay on and formulate some sort of a summer program? And I did, and I actually said, look, my background is in North American broadcasting, where voice is very important. That lady over there has got a very good voice. I'll do it if I can have her as a presenter. And that was Gloria Hunniford.
Wow. Yeah, I completely agree with you. Superb presenter.
She was well trained.
And I can't think by whom.
No, of course not.
Of course, she suffered a family tragedy. She lost her daughter to cancer, didn't she?
She did. And just one little side issue is that Karen, we had friends here in Brighton, and we would come over for short holiday breaks to Brighton from Belfast. And we brought Karen over on one such occasion. And she and Tracy were quite good friends, and they were down at the beach in Brighton on the trampoline, and I was in London working, but Val said Karen came in with blood streaming from her mouth, and she'd gone onto the trampoline and come down and bit her tongue rather badly.
That's awful.
I was able to say that. The one thing I knew about Karen was she got a little scar on her tongue. But she was a lovely girl. And it was very tragic that Gloria lost her.
Yes, I completely agree. I remember it, actually. Now, you've mentioned some names there. So you've mentioned Val. Is that your wife?
That was my wife, yeah.
And Tracy?
That's my daughter.
Right, because I was coming on, if I may say so, to whether you do have children.
Yes, I have one daughter and two grandchildren.
So your daughter is Tracy.
Yes.
And where does Tracy live, if I'm allowed to ask?
Yes, she lives in Belfast because she came over when she was 11. She was 11 when we went to Belfast, and she made all her friends there. So when we came back in 1990, she was married and she got both her sons, I guess. So she opted, and didn't really have much choice, but she wanted to stay where her background was, and so on. On top of which,
go ahead, Keith. Sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. But she turned into from a gangly young girl. She turned into a very beautiful lady. And she became Northern Ireland's top model. In fact, she was Ireland's top model. She modeled for people like Costello. So she had a very, very satisfactory career.
My goodness. I look at you and I think, beautiful daughter? And the answer is obvious, of course.
Absolutely.
So your grandchildren, did you say they're both boys?
Yes.
So they are proper Northern Irish?
Yes, they are. Although the entire family are very proud of their Canadian heritage, and they stay very close to their Canadian relatives. And my daughter had a slight Ulster accent with a slight Canadian accent. The boys were much more sounded Northern Irish, and still do to some extent, even though the one has lived in Newcastle for 10 years and the other in Bristol. Right, we're going to leave that there because here, ready to join us, is the beautiful Melissa Conti. And there she is. She's not skulking in the corner, she's just waiting for me to get rid of me being. There we go.
Well, what happened to that nice gentleman? What happened to the nice gentleman who was just talking?
Well, if you recall, you had quite a chat with him 3 or 4 weeks ago. He's one of the two Bs.
Well, where did he go? You just popped him off.
Well, actually, I was. It was a conversation that we had a couple of weeks ago, and he thought it might be a good idea because it's done early in the morning to play it at this time. So
okay.
He could be reminded about it.
Oh, okay. I'm feeling a little bit warm this morning with all that fire in the background there.
Oh, I can turn the fire off if you like.
No, that's fine. It's a nice ambiance. I'm just feeling it's either a fireplace or my apartment's in trouble.
Frozen just for a moment. We sometimes have problems with the internet, but it's showing a very strong signal. So I'm not quite sure what's happened.
I'm on, Keith. I can see us live.
Shall we try and get you again?
Sure.
Oh, there we go. No, it's working now.
Oh, good.
It's working.
That's good.
That's good.
Baby. I'm here with my cat. Hi, baby.
So how are you? Because you were not at all well last week.
No, yeah, much better. It just takes a while. It takes a while to recover. So I had to give myself that time. But yeah, it wasn't fun. Just say that. I'll just say that. That's about all I can say about it.
Now, Melissa, I'm going to hang my head in shame because I have a confession, and I was burying myself till I can make it to you privately. But I have, which I'm going to show you next week because I forgot to bring it today, the neck of a bottle of beer with a cap on it with the stars and the stripes. And the reason I've got the neck is I got, and he's now still waiting, is Miles Jenner, the head of the brewery who showed you around, and Connor made a beer to try and test it against the real brew. And I made all the arrangements. I got onto my little buggy. I put the 2 bottles of beer between my feet. And because I'm still getting used to this thing, is I went around a corner and the 2 bottles of beer flew out from between my feet and smashed on the curb.
Well, you know what? Actually, Keith, because it's been almost a year old, it's best if it not be. It's more of a fresh beer. It's supposed a bitter. A bitter is supposed to be fresh. It takes about 3 weeks to make. So
right.
We won't have
time. Well, if he
can
make it again and hang my head in shame and tell him that he can blame me, and this time, once I get it, I shall treat it with kid gloves, absolute kid gloves. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to have to go down cap in hand to Miles Jenner and tell him he's going to have to wait as well. Sometimes putting these things in my hands is a disaster. Believe me, I can't even step down the curb without falling flat on my face. I did the other day, and luckily there was only one car heading towards me, and it screeched to a halt, and the driver leapt out and helped me to my feet.
Well, you're lucky you weren't in New York. We wouldn't be speaking.
Lucky it wasn't as early as it was, because
they would be beeping at you.
Yeah.
They would be beeping at you to get up. They'd be yelling at you to get up. Actually, no, people would help you up. Yeah, they would. They would. You'd have a whole crowd of people picking you up. And then the police would arrive, and then the military.
Well, now, I mean, you're quite right. People are so very kind, and I try to pretend, that I'm not as old as I am. That's one thing. I haven't got to dyeing my hair yet, but secondly, that I'm not. My Parkinson's doesn't affect me as much as it does. And yesterday, I was afraid I was taken quite ill, and the lovely lady Jane, who looks after me here while I'm here, was so concerned that she drove me home. But after a good night's sleep, I'm okay. But
Good.
But people are kind.
Yes.
There is an inherent kindness in human nature. The trouble is, it just sometimes gets hidden when we have things like the Middle East crop out, and Putin making trouble. And
they're just. It's sad when you have. A lot of times, power will kind of mask a lot of any goodness that the person has underneath it all.
You're absolutely right. I think, what is the saying? Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
And I don't know that you want to make whether I want to necessarily make that declaration, but it goes to some people's heads. And there's just so much. A lot of times you're brought up with resentments from parents, and they foist it onto you, and then you grow up with that, with the thinking that certain people are evil and we're good, and that's what you walk around with, and then it grows and grows and grows, and it grows into something that's going on in the Middle East. It's just absolute hatred. So, I don't know. I have a lot to say, but I don't know that I want to say it this morning.
No, but I think you're absolutely right, and I actually did one of my famous rants the other morning and said, really, what has happened to mankind? Because even out in the street, you get people now, which never happened when I was a younger man, is politically, those Tories, they're toffs. And the implication is that they're all rich and that they're oppressing the poor. And then the other side is those Labour people, they're all commies. And I said, where has this hatred come from? At one time, Winston Churchill, when the House of Commons was being rebuilt after it was bombed during the war, somebody said, "Oh, well, now is the chance for us to really pull it down and have one of these great big chambers and make it very convenient to govern." And Churchill said, "No, it will be a cockpit. It will be a debating chamber, and that's the way that good governance takes place, and that's the way it should be." Well, and so it is. And actually, our chamber, a bit like yours, is one of the few where you don't find delegates or MPs getting into fisticuffs, even if the debate gets very, very strong. That seems to have disappeared from the populace.
It's interesting to see your form of government when you compare it to my form of government. So your parliament is like our House of Representatives. And I guess if you've heard about our House of Representatives, I guess we finally picked a speaker. He's a little too far on the right for me, but there are some issues where I agree with him. So hopefully it'll be okay. But I could not imagine my country being governed by simply the House of Representatives. The country would come to an absolute halt. See, because we also have the presidency, and then we also have the Senate, and then we also have our judiciary. So we have a lot of, I know it takes a long time to get legislation through, but we have our checks and balances. It's not just the House of Representatives. Yes. That's, wow, that would be awful. So I'm at least grateful, yes. Even though I'm not particularly pleased with the president we have. I think he's just botched up the Middle East again, another botch. But what was it? One of his financial advisors, Jake Sullivan, comes out in Foreign Policy magazine and says, "Oh yes, before the Hamas attack, oh yeah, we've got everything under control. We've done a lot of diplomatic work in the Gaza." Really? Who are you talking to? Who are you talking to that you're doing diplomatic work? You're doing diplomatic work with people who hate Israel and want to kill them. Okay? You can't do diplomacy with someone who wants to obliterate you. You can't. Could you imagine if your next door neighbor wanted to kill you every chance, but you're going to sit down and make peace? How? How are you going to do that? He's going to want to strangle you across the peace table. Come on. There's no negotiate. How do you negotiate with somebody who really wants to kill you?
No, that's right. Where hate has taken over. But just going back to your form of government,
wow,
and our form of government, as you say, you've got 3 tiers, and we've got 3 tiers, and it was.
How do you have 3 tiers?
Well, we've got a head of state, who's the monarch. We've got the House of Lords, which is broadly equivalent to your Senate, and our House of Commons, which is equivalent to your House of Representatives.
Does the king truly exert any power? He doesn't seem like he probably would do it more in a diplomatic sense.
Well, we say that the monarch doesn't have any power. But of course, if he wanted to, he could refuse assent to something in the House of Commons, and constitutionally, it could not go into law. Very, very rarely happens, but it can happen.
Yeah, but I think given the state of the monarchy right now, and hopefully things will calm down, because honestly, it's tabloid fodder. That's what the monarchy has become, sadly. And let's hope that things can calm down.
Yeah.
Well, no, because of him too.
Yeah, but he's the commander-in-chief of the armed forces,
right?
And that is quite independent of Parliament. So it was Socrates, I think, or Plato in his Republic, said the best form of government is a combination of monarchy, oligarchy, and democracy. You've got monarchy, you've got a president, you've got oligarchy, you've got the Senate, you've got a democracy, you've got the House of Representatives. We've got the King, we've got the House of Lords, and we've got the Democratic Chamber, the House of Commons. And it is very, very difficult to overthrow that when you think about it.
Right.
Because actually, if you overthrow one, it doesn't necessarily mean that you've got can overthrow the other. And particularly since there is a division of power. I mean, people smirk when you say the king is the commander in chief, but it's bloody difficult to overthrow the constitution and the governance of the House of Commons and the House of, if in fact the bloke who's got the army behind him is
against you. Yeah, yeah, that's true. Very true.
So actually, it is rather clever, I think, and I'm sure that dear old Tom Paine, God bless his soul, when he was helping to manipulate and formulate the early fathers and what the power should be, had this in mind, because although he was anti-monarchist, he was anti-monarchist because he recognized the power that the monarchy still had.
Right. It's always the power of the military, really. It's the fact he's got the power of the military, assuming that he still really does. I don't know how that would play out, to be quite honest. In today's day and age, if he had to.
You are slightly military, aren't you?
What was that?
Well, your son is about to become military.
Correct, but he does not have a monarch. I mean, I guess you could even liken it to sort of a dictator that's making that command decision. It's all of the government making that decision to take military action at the same time. Plus, as you can see by the craziness that goes on in my country, most people in my country are armed. Who's going to walk into someone's house when there's a possibility of an AR-15, about to be pointed at their heads?
Yes.
But you can't do that. You're not armed.
No, in the main, that's true.
I mean, what happens in my country with the mass shootings is a result of all of that. But at the same time, it's going to be very difficult for a government to take over the people.
Yes.
Wouldn't it be much easier for your king to take over the people if he decided he wanted to?
Well, of course, there is always that worry. But you see, our balance of power is that the king is not allowed into the House of Commons. That is, when he makes his speech, he always makes it from the House of Lords. And a man called Black Rod goes and knocks on the door of the House of Commons and says, okay, he's ready to let you in now so he can make his speech to you. And they all troop in. But he can't go the other way.
Well, okay. I know, but does your parliament have the use of the military?
Well,
to back them up?
The Parliament would actually decide that we would go to war. But I think what I'm trying to say is that, for instance, your son becomes a Marine, and he will do exactly what his commander says.
Right.
I mean, that's the military are trained for that. And our military are the same. If the commander in chief actually did say, do this, they would do it.
Right.
So it is a check and a balance. I think it's very clever, actually.
Yeah, I don't think that
it may be open to abuse, but it's
well,
clever.
everything is open to abuse, certainly. But I don't think that this king in particular would. I just don't see him ever doing something like that. I mean, I may be wrong, but he just seems like a very genteel man.
But he is. But and actually, the Queen was a very thoughtful and constitutional lady.
She was wonderful.
But the fact is that it's never been tried in this country.
Right.
And it was tried in your country under your last president. And actually, the system worked, did it not?
Yeah, it did. The system worked. But I don't know. I mean, I'm going to be honest. I just think there's just one disaster. Whenever there's a big crisis going on, you can really rely on Joe Biden to make the wrong decision. Like, guys, and they seem to sort of be living in this alternate dimension where no one else is living.
Yeah.
You know,
I agree. All governments in the world are like that, I think.
Good Lord. I'm like, what? What? Like, you know, and it's sad. And it's sad that the idea that, because everybody would love to see peace in the Middle East, but how are you going to see peace in the Middle East?
Yeah.
How?
Yeah.
I mean, take a look up on Wikipedia or wherever your sources are and look at the Hamas covenant, which is still in play. They'll tell you that they don't really use it, but they won't get rid of it because they still really believe it. And part of their covenant and their purpose and their mission statement is to obliterate Israel.
Yeah.
How do you negotiate with that?
Yeah. No, you can't. But it is essentially the strength of anything that Biden does is the will of the people, isn't it?
Sort of.
You've got an election coming up next year.
Well, I don't like the will of the people. See, I don't necessarily think that's the case. We do have an election next year. That's going to be quite. You know what? I would love to be. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take the training, and I want to be one of the voter workers. I do. I want to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's great.
Well, I think it's, the system is far from perfect. But I mean, take Yprk in Belarus. He comes through election time and he just says, "I'm going to win."
Yeah,
and he does by 95%. You know, I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's not.
At least we don't have that. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, our both countries were lucky in that respect. We really are.
Now,
and it's interesting because it's almost like the turmoil of all the different checks and balances creates a stability of sort.
Yes.
I know it sounds a little strange. It's like opposite, but it creates, and I'm hoping that our they always talk about that democracy isn't going to survive and blah, 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 blah. You know, what's the alternative? Yeah. Nobody's going to want to go to the alternative. You know, I mean, although I got to tell you, there's some crazy legislation that comes out of my country. I mean, it's just insane. And it's primarily the state legislatures. I can't even mention them. I can't even mention it here. I'll get too upset. So I just want to kind of sit by the fire right now and enjoy myself, enjoy my cup of coffee, sitting by the fire.
But I have lost track in many ways of. I mean, normally, I know there's either Hubert Humphrey or John F. Kennedy, for instance, but it's all very confused for this election. Who is still in the race?
Well, let's see. Joe Biden. I don't know if there's really any Democrat, it's crazy. You can't find one person to run up against Joe Biden, especially after just one disaster after another. Be a serious Democrats, seriously. And then the Republicans at least they have a line of candidates. You've got Ron DeSantis, you've got Nikki Haley, you've got this other gentleman. I apologize if he's watching because I can't pronounce his name. Of course, Donald Trump, who's spending his campaign time in court. It's a comedy. Seriously, it's a comedy. So anyway, yeah, that's what we have, which is just dismal.
Yeah. Now, normally, a political party in your country is selected at a convention, isn't it?
Yes, it's really selected by a bunch of guys and maybe a couple of gals, peppered in there, who's going to make the decisions behind the scenes, and then they just confirm it, for everybody during the convention. Rah rah siskumba. Yeah, it's already decided before the convention. I don't know. I suppose there could be an upset, but
but will Trump go to the convention, or will he remain
he'll go to the convention to accept the nomination? Sure. You know? But I just don't know.
You
I
think he'll
don't
be
know.
nominated?
I don't know how it's going to play out. I honestly don't know.
Well,
I really don't.
it's theatre that we can enjoy.
It's theater, and I got to say something, and a lot, I wonder how things would play out overseas if Trump were president.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
I don't either.
I mean, I don't know how the Russian-Ukraine war would have turned out. I certainly don't think there would be as many rockets flown out of North Korea. And I don't know about the Middle East. I don't know what would have happened. I don't think he would have been as trusting as Biden is and his administration.
Yeah.
I don't think so. And I think it's almost like, as I mentioned before, the chaos creates stability. Trump is so chaotic when it comes to foreign policy, right? There's no steady hand with him with foreign policy. But what he does is creates an instability within his opponents, because his opponents don't have a clue as to what he's doing. Because he doesn't have a clue as to what he's doing, right? So if you have someone who has no clue what they're doing, but they have the mightiest military behind them in the world, you're going to be like, whoa, I don't know what this guy's going to do, because he's a nut, right? He's nuttier than Putin, because at least Putin, you know what he's going to do. You know exactly what Putin's going to do. No, there's no question what Putin's going to do. All you got to do is look at his life. Like Connor summed it all up in his senior thesis in college. You know exactly what he's going to do. He's going to kill his opponents. He's going to invade. He wants the glory of the Soviet Union back together again, right? There's no deviation from that playbook.
No, that's right.
Trump,
You're quite right.
Trump, you have no idea what he's talking about, because he doesn't know what he's talking about. So in some ways, it's almost a good thing. Seriously. Like, you don't know what he's going to do.
Well, the only thing I can say is the world is a crazy place at the moment, so perhaps Trump is the man to fit in.
Seriously, I don't know. I mean, and like I said, I don't like his domestic policy. I don't like what's,
But that is haphazard, aren't they? I mean, is building here's Lena. There is Melissa.
How are you? Yeah, lovely. You actually have very nice feet. It's looking lovely. You're looking like 20 years younger. You're looking like 45.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
Yeah, you're looking younger.
I like her.
Thank you.
Yeah, but biscuits for
She
you.
brings me my meals.
Oh,
meals
good.
on wheels.
Yeah, it's lovely. See you later.
Bye. 45. Ooh, I'm going to walk around just strutting around today. Look at me. I'm young.
Is to use the parlance of the young, you look very tasty, my dear.
What is it? One of my friends said, "Oh, you look like a snack."
Lovely.
Hey, I'll take it all. I'll take it all.
Absolutely. Yes, but I mean, politics really is providing a backdrop that is. I mean, even at the lowest levels, at the town council level, they're just absolute theatre, and they don't realize it. That's the point.
Yeah, I don't, and it's funny because I don't go to my town. I should go to my village meetings. I should, because there really isn't any local journalism anymore.
No, that's right.
Because the big corporations that own the local journalism, they sold out to the hedge funds and the private equity firms. Yeah. Like there's any equity? No. I can go on and on and on about that. But you don't want to hear that. But there's, my town in Terrytown, I was driving through the other day through the main, it's called a high street. We call it Broadway. And so I'm driving through because I went to pick up my friend who's north of the village. And that was a mistake because traffic galore. But this is the first traffic jam where I was actually happy because this village is so vibrant and alive, and everyone's shopping and going to coffee shop. Listen, I went to the coffee. I did go to the coffee shop. The line was out the door. I was like, I don't want it that bad. I don't want coffee that bad. So I went home and made my own coffee, and then got back in the car. But yeah, it's we've got the Halloween parade coming up. You have to see some of the displays. You know what I'll do, because Halloween is coming up. I'm going to send you a bunch of photos.
Oh, please, yes.
Of Halloween in Terrytown. It's hilarious. It's so funny. People in my town, the village, I should call it a village, are so hilarious, so clever. And it's huge because we have Sleepy Hollow, the legend of Sleepy Hollow, Washington Irving. Yeah. Washington Irving's house is right down the road. Very charming, cute little house by the river. And we go there for tours. It's just such a beautiful time. And I know we love Christmas too, but Halloween is our official holiday. So I'm going to I'll send you photos if you'd like to put them on of Terrytown.
Oh,
and if you want to call me on Halloween, I can come on Halloween.
Yes, I do. What day is it? It is November the 5th is a Sunday.
Let's see. So today is what? Today is the 27th.
Today is the 27th.
So Tuesday, right? I think the Tuesday is the 31st, which is Halloween.
Oh well, why don't we do that? Because and I mean, for once, what time do your celebrations start?
Oh, they've been going on for the last month. So
no, I mean, what time at night?
Oh, it's funny because they have a parade on Saturday. Actually, they have the parade tomorrow. I can probably get some video and send it over to you.
Why don't we? If you tell me what time does the parade start?
Well, you know what I'll do here. Why don't we do this? Why don't I come on Tuesday morning, which is Halloween morning, and just show you some of the. I'll send you some things, and you can pop it on the screen. So, because I don't know how to share on this, but
that's great.
Yeah. And then you can just pop the photos.
Okay.
There's some funny decorations. You're gonna love it.
Tuesday would be great.
Yeah, so Tuesday morning.
Same time.
Yeah, same time.
Okay.
And we can I'll come on with, I don't know. I'll take the cue from the cat. I'll dress up like my cat or something like that.
Oh, you're on. I think that's wonderful. I mean, not least of which is, Melissa, as you know, one of the very important things that you do, you and sometimes Susanna when she's available, is you bring the whole concept of a different community, a different society, how things are done, to people who otherwise, and I'm sorry to say it, would be ignorant of it. I think if we're going to have world understanding, we've got to start to understand at this level. Gosh, this is what Halloween is like. Never mind what we've been told. This is what it's like, and to get a feel and a sense of it. So that's absolutely great. Yes.
Yeah. It's so much
take a note,
fun.
people. Is on Tuesday at approximately this time. We shall be with Melissa at the Halloween parade in New York. Yes, excellent.
Yeah, I'll get some. It's on Saturday. It's tomorrow. I know Connor does not want me going out there because you cannot drive. I mean, you can't drive. So I'll just walk into town. It's about a mile. I'll just walk into town. I'll take some video. It's just so amazing. Everybody comes out. They swarm Terrytown, Sleepy Hollow, swarm them. It's so fantastic. It really is. I'm just so happy to be living here. It's a great town. It's a great area. So
absolutely. No, I'm really look forward to that. Halloween is gaining purchase in this country, but it's still it's got November the 5th and Christmas to compete with. So it's not quite as although I heard a lady, somebody said, are you going to allow your your little girl to go out on the streets on October the 31st. And I heard the lady say, "Oh, she talks about nothing else." So Halloween is starting to get into the psyche of the very young, which means that
it's
it'll grow.
just fun. I'll just say one thing. I look back when I was a kid, and I'm so sorry to say, to tell you about the costume I owe it for some strange reason, and I have no idea what I was thinking, why I would dress up the way I dressed up. Is just, today you'd never do it. You'd never think about it. It would be unheard of. So I used to dress up like, what do we call it? My father used to call them like, and it's horrible. Basically like what my father would call a bum, like a bag man, a homeless person. And I thought, I was thinking back in, girls would dress up like ballerinas. Why am I dressed up like a homeless person? And thinking that this is a costume. What a horrible thing. I mean, I'm so happy times have changed. I mean, seriously. I'm like, I was looking back at the photos. I was, oh my God. And my father helped me dress up. I'm like, are you serious? Like if he were here, I would scold him, How would you do that? Why would you let a child do that? What a horrible thing. And I remember as a child always wanting to help homeless people. And yet I'm dressing up as a homeless person for Halloween. Okay, well, times have changed, thank goodness.
Do you know the scenes of Halloween that I love is with E.T.
Oh yeah. That's funny.
When he's sitting in that basket with the sheets around him, his great big alien eyes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, anyway, it's good. It'll be fun this week. We'll have a good time.
Yes, I'm going to look forward to sharing it on Tuesday, and everybody else can share it too, because we'll broadcast it live. Yeah,
very good, very good. And I'll start sending you some photos because while I walk to work, I look at all the different decorations. It's pretty funny stuff.
Oh well, I really look forward to it because all we know is that really that Halloween is a big time in the United States. Yeah. And actually, strange enough, it's through watching movies like E.T. that we've got some vague idea of what takes place. So this will really give us a very, very good idea of what it's all about.
Yeah. That'll be
all
fun.
Right then. I shall toodle pip you until Tuesday.
Until Tuesday. Very good.
I look forward to it.
Very good.
Okay.
Talk to you
Bye,
later.
Melissa.
Bye.
Melissa Conti from New York, and she'll be with us on Tuesday with some live versions of what's happening in New York on the 31st. We'll get it, as it were, from the horse's mouth. So that's fantastic, and I'm glad we started to talk about it today. Hobgoblins, witches, spookies, all sorts of interesting things. Well, that's it for today. I feel a little strange about being put under the microscope, but the two bees, their workplace, if you like, is asking questions, and it feels to be asked questions by experts. You think that the story comes out. There we go. And not a bad not a bad way to have your everything stripped out from your life, as it were. Now I'm trying hard to find the little bit and piece that says, there we go. Okay. Until Monday morning, at 8 o'clock with at least one of the bees, and hopefully Richard will be well enough to join us. So it's from me, Keith Hayes, from Mirador Television and from the White Hart Hotel for one of the few next week will be a lead up to the last time that we'll be broadcasting from here. So it's a toodle pip. Toodle pip. Well, there you are. That's what happened yesterday. So join us. Join us on Monday morning at 8 o'clock for the 2 Bs, and God only knows what they'll have up their sleeve. They don't tell me until the very last minute. But then on Tuesday, when we actually repeat Monday's program, but we shall break in at 10 o'clock to see what's happening on Halloween in New York with Melissa Conti. Join us then. Oh, yes, join us then. That sounds as if it's going to be a hell of a lot of fun. Till then, toodaloo.